Poe saw a very large house with porches on three sides and a picket fence that was flush against the street. At the front gate, Garrett nodded toward the first-floor room to the left and told them in a hushed voice, "That's Maxwell's room in the southeast corner. You fellows wait here while I go in and talk to him." It was still so hot that Maxwell's unscreened windows were fully raised, and the front door was wide open for the sultry breeze. The sheriff walked up the porch steps, and Poe followed just far enough to sit on the stoop, while McKinney squatted outside the fence with his rifle in both hands. The kid lofted himself over the fence and walked toward the Maxwell house. He saw there'd been a fiesta in the dance hall, and with the near full moon he could see some people still strolling on the parade grounds, though it was probably 11:30. He could see the curing carcass of the steer hanging under the eave of the north porch, and could have butchered the porterhouse steaks from the short loin right then, but his loyalty to his old friends caused him to seek permission. Waiting in the hallway for a moment, Garrett listened for sounds of wakefulness in the house. The shade of the front porch roof made the interior moonless. Walking inside the 20-by-20 south bedroom, he could make out Pete Maxwell sleeping flat on his back in a nightshirt, his white top sheet flung off in the heat. Garrett went to the head of the double bed, felt the sag of the mattress as he gently eased down onto it, and sitting there, he softly laid a hand on Maxwell's forearm as he whispered, "Pete." Maxwell inhaled in a shocked, "Huh?" "It's Pat," he whispered. "We're looking for the kid. Seen him here?" Maxwell was still waking and wiped his left eye as he said, "Week ago." And then they heard a voice outside asking, "¿Quién es?" "Who is it?" The deputy thought it could have been Maxwell himself or a house guest walking back from the privy, so he just watched. Because Poe was partially hidden on the stoop, the kid failed to see him until he could have reached out and felt the figure's rifle. Electrified, as always, by danger, the kid hopped up the steps, whispering, "¿Quién es?" McKinney and Poe did not understand Spanish. The kid was backing away from the deputy as he headed toward Pete Maxwell's bedroom and said again, "¿Quién es?" John Poe still presumed the kid was a house guest, and he stood up with a calming hand and said in reassurance, "Don't be afraid of us." John Poe was just a few feet from him when the kid ducked into Maxwell's room, calling out, "Pedro, ¿quiénes son esos hombres afuera? Pete, who are those men outside?" Sheriff Garrett heard the voice outside, but failed to recognize it at first as he worried that it could be Maxwell's brother-in-law and frequent house guest, Manuel Abreu. But the form of the man was like that of the kid, and as he asked Pete his frantic question, he was walking close enough to reach a hand out to the foot of the bed. Garrett yanked out the newish Colt .44 he'd taken from Billy Wilson, and the kid heard the scratch of leather and the 4 clicks of a hammer getting to full cock in the hand of a just-recognized upright shape on the bed, and in his precaution to not injure a friend, he left his Colt in his trouser pocket, but held out the butcher knife in his left hand as he skewed farther away, asking again, "¿Quién es? ¿Quién es?" Without warning, Garrett fired at the kid, and the flash of the gun faintly illumined him as a .44 caliber bullet hit the kid's chest and the left atrium of the heart. The shock of it was like a punch that spun the kid and swatted him to the floor. Then there was a fiery, searing pain that overcame all other feeling, but it waned as the kid's body acquired its education in dying. The kid felt himself floating upward, felt a surprising happiness. With each quitting of an organ or process, there came a greater liberation, an aliveness, an awareness of never having been so real. Seeing himself on the floor, and the chaotic concern around him, he felt affection for all of them, felt pity for who he used to be, but he was overwhelmed by his new fluidity and increase, his ever greater sense of wonderful love and limitlessness, of having now what he'd always wanted but couldn't ever name. With 2 fingers, Delovina tenderly closed his eyelids, and when she noticed the tall sheriff lingering beside her in silence, she hurled a full load of curses at him. "You pisspot!" she screamed. "You traitor! You snake in the grass! You have murdered our little boy!" Pete Maxwell walked back into his room, and he and the sheriff exchanged glances. He who'd been afraid of the kid was now afraid of Garrett. And then Paulita was there in a nightgown. With a face that lacked emotion, she looked at a nothing-there kid and flatly said, "And now he'll never be old."
21 were the lives that Garrett said I took. That was just another lie he wrote down in his book. For he had to make it seem as though I were the devil's seed. A man who will lie to save his skin won't look you in the eye. Garrett never saw my face when he let those bullets fly. And I died there in Pete Maxwell's room, no boots upon my feet, in the dark, and all alone. And the vultures came and chipped away the headstone from my grave and took it home. The souvenirs, history books are written by the ones who survive. Garrett was the one who came out of that room alive. And he harnessed up my ghost, made it sing and dance, and I am dancing still, dancing still. And the skies of Lincoln County were as blue as blue could be, and the sun that shines on you used to shine on me.
There was a ruckus outside as the kids' Mexican friends crowded around the Maxwell house, seething. Had there been anyone to urge them on, they would have rioted against the kid's murderer, but the one who could have induced them to do that was now dead. Still, the sheriff and his deputies stayed wakeful inside Pete's bedroom that night, barricading themselves to forbid access, their guns ever in their hands in case the locals sought retaliation. Garrett looked at the dead body still on the floor and told his deputies, "Kid Bonnie was as cool under trying circumstances as any man I ever saw. I guess he was so surprised for an instant he could not collect himself." At 1 a.m. of Friday the 15th, Celsa and Saval, Delovina and Jesus, and a boy named Paco Anaya carried the kid eastward across the old parade grounds to a carpenter's shop on the southern limits of the fort, where they laid him on a workbench. With lumber scarce, some of Maxwell's shepherds tore apart the roof of the falling-down stable next to the Indian commissary and used its ceiling planks for the kid's interment. Jesus Silva then sawed and nailed the boards to construct a basic coffin, as Manuela and Celsa and other weeping senoras washed the kid's nakedness, brushed his hair, dammed the Colt 44's large exit wound with a rag, and dressed him in a fine linen shirt and trousers donated by Pete Maxwell. They left the kid's white feet bare and arrayed yellow beeswax candles all around him, and off and on his friends visited him for a night wake of rosaries and Spanish funeral hymns. Sheriff Garrett and his deputies left the fort around noon that Friday, and soon after that his friends tenderly laid the kid's corpse into the coffin and shoved it onto Vicente Otero's hauling wagon. Then the entire population of Fort Sumner, even saloon keepers who never closed up, followed the funeral cortege to the old soldiers' cemetery. Young Paco Anaya had worked all morning with Vicente, digging out a grave next to those of the kid's pals Tom Folliard and Charlie Beaudry. There was no priest or minister to handle the rites, so Hugh Leeper, a Christian nicknamed the Sanctified Texan, read from the 14th chapter of the book of Job, "Man that is born of a woman is of few days and full of trouble. He cometh forth like a flower, and is cut down. He fleeth also as a shadow, and continueth not." And, "Thou shalt call, and I will answer thee. Thou wilt have a desire to the work of thine hands. For now thou numberest my steps. Dost thou not watch over my sin? My transgression is sealed up in a bag, and thou sewest up my iniquity." In Leeper's funeral sermon, he continually referred to the kid as "our beloved young lad," and closed by telling the congregation, "Billy cannot come back to us, but we can go to him, and we'll see him again up yonder. Amen." Then Paco hammered into the ground a simple cross made from a stave from the Maxwell's picket fence. Crudely painted on it was "Billy the Kid," but nothing more.